Thank you very much, Mahnaz. She's a real sister for a long time, and we share many things. And regretfully, she's from Iran, I'm from Saudi Arabia. But we hope that our love and friendship to each other will bring everybody to each other as well. And yes, I guess our love for literature does make us see the world in a different way. But also in my time, a long time ago, there was nothing called cross like you have now, sociology of literature and things of that sort. So mine was it was an English literature Renaissance drama, actually. But in it, I worked on the issue of the stereotype of the Muslim in English Renaissance drama. So again, the stereotype is part of my way I think, because everybody gets stereotyped one way or another, and certainly women are very much stereotyped all the time. But it is a real pleasure to be here today for this 2020 vision, mobilizing for women's rights and eliminating violence against women. And when I first met Mahnaz, she invited me to come to Washington to speak about violence against women 12 years ago. So here we are, a full circle, still talking about violence against women. But Mahnaz, Milan, and Cindy, in their statements, have set the stage in many ways for the few thoughts that I will say, especially that I feel that the WLP is about grassroots activism, and it's about how people believe, think, behave, and how do they deal with an inheritance of codes, values, and practices from one generation to another. And that change is slow, and it's frustrating often, but it is sustainable if it's done the right way through engaging communities. And I believe this is what WLP is trying to do in its work. I certainly am very honored to be here, and I have been asked to speak about a topic which I care about very deeply, and I will speak about the relationship between culture, gender equality, and women's rights, and ending harmful practices and violence against women. And as Mahnaz said, we should say we have a dream. Well, when I came to UNFPA, I had a dream of introducing this link to UNFPA, and believe it or not, the resistance that I had in UNFPA to talk about culture, because they're women activists. UNFPA is very much an activist organization. We're passionate about sexual and reproductive health and women's rights, and so culture just seemed something that is totally opposite to what rights and human rights are supposed to be. So I had a dream, and I think I'm fulfilling it slowly, hopefully, before I leave. And as an international civil servant of the United Nations, and as a person who has had the opportunity to traverse many cultures, I am really passionate about the role that culture can play in bringing about change towards human rights. I'm also adamant about cultural awareness and engagement as a way to promote human rights and thus achieve international goals for peace, justice, and development. To some, it might sound contradictory, but if examined with depth, it does not have to be so. It depends how we view culture and how we engage communities and empower them to find their own way to bring about change. Within UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund, we are pioneering within the UN system a different approach, looking at the links, gender mainstreaming, cultural sensitivity to a human rights-based approach. Both a culture and a gender lens are required at the same time to promote human rights and bring about change in thinking and in behavior. And we have learned that understanding the cultures in which we work and being able to identify and build on positive elements within them can facilitate the identification of harmful practices and bringing about lasting change that comes from within. And I would like to make it clear that this does not mean that violations of human rights should go unchallenged. On the contrary, the advantage of a culturally sensitive approach is that it provides insights on how to align cultural practices and human rights most effectively. This approach also provides the framework to contest existing practices and to negotiate change. It also empowers communities to look within, and thus the conclusions and solutions are regarded as indigenously owned by the people themselves. So they're not being seen as a Western agenda being imposed on societies, other societies. We have found this to be true in tackling such challenges as female genital mutilation or cutting, and here you see the cultural aspect. Some want mutilation, some want cutting, because they argue that if you say mutilation, the Western world is making a value judgment on a cultural practice. So they want to replace it by cutting. And there is a divide among women, whether it's cutting or mutilation, and so we use genital mutilation / cutting in addressing the violence against women, including domestic abuse and honor killings, and in working with partners to end prenatal sex selection. In Asian countries, where an estimated 100 million girls are missing due to a preference for sons. People are both shaped by and actively shape their own cultures. And one thing is certain, people in the same culture do not all think alike. Culture is not monolithic, and it is not static. On the contrary, culture is dynamic, and is constantly being challenged, and thus changed by the people themselves. In all cultures, people are critical agents of change, and I think this is what WLP is focusing on. And as you all know, engaging these agents of change is essential for mobilizing women's rights and eliminating violence against women. As we work through our organization in 140 countries to promote human rights and dignity, especially women's rights and the right to sexual and reproductive health, and we are constantly learning from our experiences. In our work, we are guided by the agreement reached in 1994 at the International Conference on Population and Development, and naturally its link to the Beijing Conferences, all based on the International Declaration of Human Rights. And over the past decades, we have learned that population issues boil down to one factor: the decisions that people, and especially women, can or cannot make about their lives. And the difficulty was in bringing the private relationship into the public space, and thus comes the impact of cultures and beliefs. When you talk about sexual and reproductive health, you're bringing the bedroom to the public, and that's the most challenging way of dealing with these issues in a public space, and thus it's natural it will create reactions against it or for it. Whether it is a decision about using contraception, or sending a daughter to school, or seeking health care during pregnancy or childbirth, and you heard the story of the mother-in-law, so it's not only men, or moving to a new city or country, the decisions that people make or cannot make are deeply rooted in their specific socioeconomic and cultural context. We also know that discriminatory attitudes and practices towards women are deeply rooted within social norms and cultural understandings, and are often stronger than the laws that have been enacted to stop them. While an effective legal framework is a precondition for ending violence against women and absolutely necessary, it is not enough to change attitudes and behaviors, because it depends on implementation of these laws. We have to work from at least two levels. We have to work from the national level through equitable laws and policies and a functioning legal system, which is informed by international standards, monitoring, and international support, and also from the community level through social change. And understanding one's own culture as it relates to human rights principles becomes a means for empowerment for individuals and communities to shape their own future and claim their own rights. We have learned that to get to the root of these issues, it is necessary to go deeper, to wear a cultural lens, to use what we call a culturally sensitive approach to facilitate change from within. Such an approach is based on the principle of mutual respect and grounded in a process of community ownership, active listening, and dialogue. Sometimes it's the smallest symbol in a specific context that can bring about a great movement for change. I hope that many of you have seen the film Moladi that we produced in Nigeria. I believe it was Nigeria, which clearly describes how the African tradition of putting a thin rope across an open door changes the house into a safe space for protecting little girls from female genital mutilation cutting, which is followed by change in the thinking and the behavior of the village through discussions and negotiations. I think you can Google it, you should see it. It's a very powerful film of a story of a woman as she was trying to fight violence against women in her own village. From the outset, this approach takes into account the broad political, economic, social, and cultural and legal frameworks with which human behavior and action take place. And this approach would facilitate the adoption of new laws or the enactment of existing ones in line with international standards such as CEDAW, as well as a more serious attempt at implementation. Through a review of case studies, we have found that effective programs to end violence against women are based on a deep understanding of the culture in which they are operating and the relationships and the power relationships and the active participation of the community they serve. This is important because violations of women's rights are often sanctioned under the cover of patriarchal interpretation of cultural practices and norms, and also sacred text. Also, violations of women's rights, especially violence against women, takes place in families and communities, often far removed from the judicial system and the domain of national laws. Thus comes the importance of empowering communities to understand and change the behavior of its members at the community level itself, either by ending the practice of violence, protecting women, and also establishing community-based legal support systems to deal with such violations and the links with the national legal system. In Mauritania, as an example, survivors of rape, and the panel mentioned it today, survivors of rape are often blamed for the crime and thrown in jail while the perpetrators go free. Correcting this gross injustice and getting society to recognize the problem of rape at all began with the grassroots efforts of 4 Mauritanian midwives who could no longer ignore the stories they were hearing from their clients. With our support, the first statistics were collected and a center was established to respond to the multiple needs of survivors. But central to overcoming resistance was a strong, charismatic Mauritanian woman called Zainabou bin Talib Moussa. To this day, she continues to press for justice in her country. Her personality, combined with her status as an experienced midwife, helped her gain support not only from the local people, but also government officials. Around her, she gathered imams and other religious leaders, lawyers, magistrates, doctors, police officers, psychiatrists, and other midwives, people who would otherwise be difficult to bring together. Many of these high-profile individuals subsequently lobbied the government of Mauritania to acknowledge the problem of sexual violence and to introduce strategies to combat it. But as I said, change takes a long time, and the efforts are still ongoing. We have found that it is important to build on positive cultural traditions can be powerful leverage of change. From Bangladesh to Ghana to Mali, the age-old practice of consulting with village elders, usually men, but also sometimes women, has been cultivated to begin to eliminate violence against girls and women. In the work we do, we take a right-based approach. This means doing more than supporting the provision of services. It means encouraging people to become civic and political actors, to demand and claim their rights, and work for the rights of others. In Colombia, this approach brought individuals in communities to draw the connections between the rights related to one's own body as the minimal space over which people can exercise their dignity, to broader rights in the civic and political sphere. We also work hard to partner with men, and this was mentioned this morning too, because they are perpetrators of violence against women, and they are also key to bringing about change. And not all men are perpetrators of violence. This does not mean we are diluting our demands. It means giving space to men to be part of the solution and create change that is credible and sustainable. It is not easy, and it's time-consuming, and it requires continuous dialogue and conversations. But it can be done, and it should be done. In Turkey, the National Football Federation became a major partner in a campaign to stop violence against women. During the height of the football season, a captive audience of Turkish men sitting in front of their TV sets watched as players donned T-shirts and paraded banners to stop violence against women. This was reinforced with a media campaign in which the largest Turkish newspaper came to recognize that it was actually a major contributor to the sexist attitudes that perpetrate violence against women through the media reports that it has. And the newspaper now evaluates articles from a gender perspective and has instituted related training for its reporters. People are often willing to adopt new attitudes, behaviors, or practices if they are convinced that such change will improve their lives. We see this clearly in Senegal, which may soon be the first country to abandon FGM. They've done it through human rights dialogue in the community level, leading to public declarations against female genital cutting by a large group of villagers. 256 villages made the pledge just last month. The country reports a decline in prevalence, and out of 5,000 villages, more than 4,200 have abandoned the practice. This centuries-old, deeply rooted practice is being uprooted by communities themselves. This is the power of communities powering change, because they know best how to go about it in their own contextual activism. And in Yemen, where you hear lots of horrible stories right now, we are working with the Ministry of Awqaf, Religious Endowment, and Religious Guidance in helping to raise public awareness about reproductive health and the harmful effects of forced early marriage. A source book on reproductive health produced by the government guides muftis, imams, and other religious leaders on handling sensitive topics among their followers. Working with progressive interpretations of religious texts is a process that requires much discussion and knowledge, but it has to be done. There are women of faith from many, many religions who are trying to interpret religious texts from a feminist point of view, and they need the support. They get little support, and they need the support of many networks, and we are among the ones who are trying to provide the support. In India, where we are working to eliminate sex selection, legislation had to be complemented by a broad awareness-raising campaign, including, of course, human rights activists, as well as cultural agents of change and community leaders, calling for recognition of the human rights and inherent dignity and worth of girls. Publishing data increased understanding of prenatal sex selection, not only as a cultural issue, but one with social, economic, and demographic dimensions. Given the imbalance in the sex ratio, men may face difficulties in finding wives, which may lead to increased levels of gender-based violence and human trafficking. It is also important to work with health partners to address violence against women. Based on our work in the field, we have found that faith-based organizations provide anywhere between 40 to 60% of health-related services in some of the least developed countries. Therefore, it becomes imperative to work with these service providers, ensuring that beneficiaries are empowered to bring about the relevant change. In 2008, we established a global and regional networks for interfaith, and we had 7 religions connected to one another, not to discuss theology, but rather to look at what they are doing in practical terms as service delivery bodies, to work towards mutual goals to ensure that every pregnancy is wanted, every birth is safe, every person is free of HIV, and every girl and woman lives free of violence and indignity. We believe that strategic partnership with civil society, including human rights, women, and faith-based organizations, to name a few, will expand the domains of support and engagement for human rights in an age of a growing extremism. And I say isms of all kinds in the political, religious, and the social fields. And we in the United Nations actively, and I hope all of you will do the same, support the Secretary General campaign Unite to End Violence Against Women and the network of men leaders that was launched last year. For those of us mobilizing for women's rights and eliminating violence against women, we have no choice. We must work from within the realm of what societies themselves can bring to their own lives, change for a better life for everybody. I thank you very much.